that can pose a problem if you don't. You're going to cut, there's always a little space between the panels. Now, hello everybody and welcome back to the Quilters Apothecary. Today is an exciting day because we are about to start our piece along for our wonderful one block panel kaleidoscope quilt. Now, they're popular, they've been around for a long time, and I'm getting ready to do another one. I've done a ton of these guys and they're amazing and fun, and they end up as incredible art for your wall. Or if you want to add them into a quilt with a lot of borders, they work that way as well. So let me start with a few things that I like to consider as I'm making mine. So number one, we need 7 of the same panels as we start this. So we always want to remember, at least I like to remember, to get those same 7 panels from the same bolt. And the reason I like to do that is because what I've found is that when you use different bolts, or let's say you go to a website and they only have 3 of a specific panel that you're in love with, and then you go to another site and they might have the other 4 or however many panels that you need to complete your 7 total. What can happen, not always, but what can happen is that the colors can be a little bit different from bolt to bolt, and it also, of course, depends on the fabric company that's making the particular panel you're looking at. So again, I always try the best I can to get panels from the same bolt. Now, I've had a few exceptions, and actually the panel quilt and the panel that I've chose to do my example is one that was a really hard to find out of print panel, and so I had to actually go to a couple different places. Now what I did find though is that when they came in, I double checked them, the colors matched really well, so it worked, and I got lucky. And again, it can work, but you just kind of want to be aware of it as your panels come in or get shipped to you, or if you haven't purchased them at a store, you just want to double check and make sure that the colors are pretty close to the same. You don't have to be exact, but they need to be pretty close to the same. Sizing wise, usually the size is pretty good. They're pretty good about making sure that all the panels line up and are the same size. But one of the times, I've made about, I think, 10 or 15 of these. One of the times that I actually ordered from different bolts, the panel was actually like an inch smaller because I needed the two extra panels. I got 5 panels from another bolt, and 2 of the panels were about an inch off. So again, these are things that you want to consider. Now that's, again, a rarity. It's not always the case, but again, just keep that in mind and double check your panels to make sure they kind of line up the same as far as size and as far as color. Now, that's just the first tip. The other thing that I want to talk about is if you choose panels that have frames, because I find that a lot of them, at least 50% of the panels out there, do have definite frames. And let me kind of show you an example of that. Let me move my chair here. I'm going to hold up this particular deer panel. This is not the one I'm using. I would love to do this one. And actually, I think a few people that ordered panels from us actually did choose this panel. But notice on this one, this frame right here, we got these frames. That can pose a problem if you don't do what I'm going to tell you next. And we'll get there fairly quickly. So we'll talk about that in a minute. This would be fine, but the thing you want to do is when you cut the 6 panels out that you're going to actually use for your kaleidoscope, you want to make sure to cut away the frame portion. So let's go down to the table real quick before we move on, and let me talk a little bit about that. Move my notes here. Okay, so, and again, I'm jumping the gun, but I want to make sure to share this information so that you don't accidentally go ahead and start going crazy and jumping ahead, and then you're going to be frustrated. Before I would use this panel, I would cut away all of the frame. So the only thing that would be left would be the actual deer scene. I do not want any of this. I do not want this black line in here, either this or this, and I don't want this. At first you might think, oh, but that would add some interest. No, actually that would add a lot of distraction. It would not be visually pleasing, and so you definitely, before you actually start to pin your pieces together, the 6 that you're going to be using, you definitely want to trim away all of the frame. You don't want any of that frame in there. Top, sides, and bottom before you even start. So that's something to keep in mind. Let's come back to face on. So really, those are pretty much the only rules of engagement with this particular project. What about panel size? Well, panel size, in my opinion, doesn't really matter. There was a bird panel that I had, and it actually contained like 3 different sizes. It was a yard by 42 or however it came off the bolt, and it was 3 separate small panels in there. Now, one of the panels happened to measure about 20 inches by 17 inches or something like that. And that actually made a beautiful small wall hanging. So again, you're not limited by size. It's just how persnickety are you going to want to be with your piecing. Now, the other thing that I would add, would I use like pillow topper panels, i.e. something that's like 12 by 12? If I were going to want to make myself crazy, okay, but typically no, I wouldn't want to do that. And the reason is because when we actually go to strip these and then turn them into the triangles to make our kaleidoscope blocks to blend into our leftover single panel, you're going to have issues with making sure that you have enough seam allowance as you're sewing, right? So we don't want to go down too far. Like I wouldn't want to cut my strips at 1.5 inches and then try to sew together those particular blocks, because that would be a nightmare, frankly, unless you were really, wanting to do an art piece and you have some experience behind you. If this is your first kaleidoscope panel quilt, definitely follow that advice, and then maybe down the road, if you want to do something smaller, go for it. What are a few of the other things? Well, let's talk about how we're going to do this here on our quilt along. So what we're going to do today is I'm simply going to go over prepping and getting yourself ready. If you haven't ordered your panels yet, or you didn't hear about it until you saw this video, then go ahead. First of all, it doesn't matter whether you're watching it as we're doing it or whether you're going to watch it down the road a ways, middle of the year or next year or whatever. They're here to watch and to join along with and piece as you go. We're going to have these up here on the YouTube channel for you to watch as long as YouTube is here. That being said, if you want to join and do it along with us, which is even more fun, what we've decided to do is we're going to try to do this in, I would say, about 3 or 4 episodes. We're going to try to release one every week. Right? That's why we're pre-filming everything now. That way we can kind of make that definite commitment. That being said, one of the episodes, what we're going to do is we're going to do it live. So that way, if you want to join and just kind of work on your project or a project during the initial time we're doing this, then you can join live. If not, well, we're still going to put that up as one of the parts of the video, the live session. So there we go. So that's how we're going to roll here. And I'm looking forward to it. I absolutely love doing the one block panel kaleidoscopes, especially with the panels. I'll tell you what, when I first started quilting, which was about 25 years-ish ago, the panels available were just very kindergarten type things. I didn't really love the panels. Now we have such amazing panels available to us. So it's made this process really exciting. I mean, some of the pieces that you can purchase out there are, it's like going to a gallery and looking at the most amazing art you've ever seen. So, and it doesn't matter your interests. We've got wildlife, like the ones that we see here. That's typically the ones that I like to do, and I'm going to run a few of the ones that I've used to make different ones here. And then one of the last ones I did is this example, which is my elk, and I love this one. I think it turned out really, really good. So we'll picture that here. That one turned out good. So that's kind of where we're heading with whatever panel you choose. And remember, it doesn't matter what you're into. If you like fantasy, there are tons of fairies and mermaids and unicorns and all sorts of things like that. If you're into something spiritual or religious, there are some wonderful religious panels out there that you could utilize. I know that I've had a few of my friends make some beautiful pieces and give them to their church to hang at the church that they go to, and those are really lovely. So again, doesn't matter what you're into, you're going to find something that you're going to love. So, of course, the thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to buy, I'm sorry, how many? Yes, 7, not 6, 7, right? We want to make sure that you have enough panels. If you get 6, you're in trouble. If you get 6.5, you're in trouble. When you order and they ship it to you, always double check before you get started in case you have to go to a plan B or to return it. You always want to do this, even down the road if you're watching this video later and it comes to you and you're not quite ready to do it. The one thing I would always do is, for this project, always open the package that's been shipped to you from whoever you've ordered it from if you haven't gone to a quilt store and purchased it there. And make sure that they sent you 7 complete panels, because I've had that happen myself where they will send it and part of one is cut off just a little bit. And in my case, it was actually a part that was really cool that I didn't want to be cut out. And that was one of those cases in which I had to find, because they were out when I figured it out, because it was like a month later, and I had to go find another place that had that particular panel because it was out of print. And I did find it, thank goodness, and everything matched up. So it worked, but again, you always want to double check, especially with something like this, that you got 7 complete panels. So the next thing I want to talk about is we want to go ahead and we want to cut the panels. But before we go there, let me give a warning. And that warning is extremely important. What is the thing you do not want to do with your panels? We never, ever, for this particular process, want to wash or starch when we press. And the reason that is because all fabric is not created the same, even if it's off the same bolt. And it depends on where you got it and the quality of the fabric and even the weave and all these things that, you know, we don't even think about when we're doing things. But it could, when you wash it, shrink differently, right? So the thing to remember is we want to start with fresh fabric. We don't want to size it. We don't want to starch it when we press it. We don't want to wash it. We don't want water or steam or anything getting near it, because it can shrink differently, and then you're in trouble because all of your panels, the 6 that you're going to be stacking together, might not work right. All right, so that is one warning you definitely want to take to heart. No washing, no sizing, no starching, none of that. Okay, so that being said, the first thing that I like to do is I always want to cut my panels apart. Now, one of the things that I want to tell you is this. Let me get rid of this. I'm going to grab the actual panels that I'm going to use, and then we'll talk a little bit about how I cut. So one of the things that I want to add to what I was saying before, because I forgot to mention this, and I'll use this as an example. We're going to put up a picture here of a panel called Arctic Icon. Of course, this beautiful polar bear. What I want you to notice about this polar bear as you look at the panel is notice across the top and down to the actual ground where the glacier is, how plain the fabric is. Now, this one will work, but it's right on that edge. Actually, this one would work great. And the reason I say it's right on the edge is some of the panels out there actually have whatever the main part of the reason you love the panel. Let's say, for example, this polar bear. But some of the panels out there wouldn't have the ground or a sky with a little bit of differentiation in it, right? It would be just a plain background that it's on. That would not work well because when you go to piece those for your kaleidoscope, there's not a lot of variance in what's going to be showing when you actually piece the part that's going to go around your main panel. So again, you always want to make sure that whatever panel you choose, one of the other things is that there's enough variance in the fabric, i.e. there's some ground or there's some area around it that you can actually work with that to kind of blend it out and make a more cohesive and beautiful piece of art, right? So now again, that Arctic Icon is one that I absolutely love, and I'm going to be doing that one as well down the road. But also I do know that that sky will work. But the reason it works is because the glacier and all of that underneath, that will make it come to life, and it will actually work amazingly. But keep that in mind when you're also choosing the panels. Okay, so now we can move on. So the panel that I'm actually going to be working with is, let me see, what is the name of it? The Lion and the Lamb. I'm not a real religious person, but I've always loved the symbolism of the Lion and the Lamb. I just think that it's just beautiful. You know, we all want peace on earth. So this is the one that I've chose. And the artist, of course, is Abraham Hunter, who does amazing wildlife art stuff. And this piece is really well done. And I love the sky and the highlights. I just think that it looks amazing. So I'm excited about doing this one, and this is the one I'm going to be doing. The one thing to know is that obviously we're not all going to be doing the same one. Doesn't matter. That's not what this is about. You're going to pick yours and go with that. Now, this one is my one. So what I'm going to do with that, this was one of the ones, and I double checked that it matched with all the others. I'm going to take this one. This is 1 of 7, and I'm going to fold it up, and I'm going to put it in a baggie, and I'm going to put it in my project box that this project is going to live in as I'm working on it, because I want to be real careful that when I cut up my 7 panels, and I stack them and get ready to cut, that I don't cut all 7, because then you're in trouble and you got to find another panel so that you can finish your project. So I'm going to set this one aside, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about cutting the panels apart. Okay, so now if we want to go down to the table, let's talk a little bit about cutting the panels apart. Now, when panels come, depending on how big the panels are, obviously like anything on a bolt, it's folded in half. The temptation between the panels is for you to grab your ruler, line that up, and actually cut with it folded. Don't do that. Because the one thing that I've learned is these days, with the rushing of getting fabric out there, this is never lined up perfectly. So we always want to make sure to open up the fabric. So we're going to open this up. Spread that out. Okay. And now let's go back down to the table. Okay. So now, let me get that up so you can see it. We always want to cut it open. And we also, if you bring me back face forward, we want to make sure that all this extra is hanging off and out of the way. I've had a lot of friends when I've taught this class, what they'll do is they don't realize they've got some folded under and they go to cut and they cut some panels and that's very sad and very frustrating. So we don't want to do that. You want to make sure the rest of your panels are hanging off, and when I go to cut it, let's go down to the table. We're going to cut them open up. Now our initial cut, there's going to be a few things we're going to do to these panels before we get started, and that is, number one, I'm going to cut. There's always a little space between the panels. Now, this isn't the first time we're going to have our rotary cutter here for this process with the panels before we even get started. But first, we're going to do our initial separating of the panels. So go through, carefully cut all of your panels apart and set them aside, and then recount them and make sure you have 6 panels, and then the 7th panel folded and set aside. Take the time and spread those out. Make sure you don't have anything tucked under that you don't want to cut. And also watch your crease fold there in the middle. And we'll be back with our panels once they're all cut. Okay, so we have all 7 of our panels separated from each other. We do not have the final trim done yet. Of course, you can see that I have white around here. If you bought any panels that has the frames around them, of course that part's not done. I always wait until the next step before I go ahead and do that. And so for me, the next step is to go ahead and press our panels. Again, remember, we do not use any starch. We definitely do not use any steam. No shrinkage. So I'm going to put this down. My studio ironing table is a little smaller than my other studio, so I'm going to go ahead. I've got it, of course, on cotton setting, no steam. And I'm going to press, or from the looks of it, iron, all 6 of my 7 panels. The 7th panel I have folded and set aside. I'm not worried about that one right now. We won't worry about that until many steps into this process. Again, I just want to make sure to get out any of the wrinkles. For example, here's the crease from the middle of the bolt. And I know it's tempting for you to use steam or starch, but we don't want to do that. Trust the process. Now I'm going to get that crease out to the very best of my ability. There might be a little bit of a residue of a crease there that I'm not going to worry so much about. Now my iron at the long arm studio, that wouldn't be an issue because it's a Consew, weighs about 30 pounds, so it's got a little heft to it. And the heat is through the roof. Now, I trust this iron because it's almost brand new. This is kind of my spare iron. That being said, if you're not using a new iron, the one suggestion that I would have is as you press, instead of pressing it right side up, press it face down. And that way, if anything is on the bottom of your iron, it's not going to ruin your project. I like those little iron cleaning sheets. And I forgot what they're called, but I'll put a picture here. And I just use those whenever I get anything on the bottom of my iron. Takes it right off. A little bit of wrinkly shrapnel there. Again, be gentle to yourself. If you have a little bit of creasing or something, as long as you get it ironed pretty darn flat without a lot of wrinkling, you're doing fine. And then I'm going to take this, I'm going to set it aside, and then I'm going to move through the other 5 to total the 6. Now obviously we want to make sure to lay it somewhere flat. We don't want to fold it again and get creases in it. So go ahead, either put it over a couple chairs or lay it flat and continue on with your other panels. Okay, so we've pressed our 6 panels for our Kaleidoscope blocks. The next thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and do our final trim before we actually do our stacking and pinning. So let's go down to the table. Let me talk a little bit. This isn't, of course, the panel we're using, but I do want to use this as an example. So for those of you that got panels that have this beautiful frame around them, what we want to do when we trim it is we actually want to go just inside a scant amount of that frame, right? We don't want any of this showing up in our piecing. Now we do have, of course, we're going to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So some of you might say, well, but I want the best bang for my buck, so can I go out 1/4 of an inch or an 1/8 of an inch and trim off that there? No, don't do that. Don't take that chance of, if the fabric, remember, it hasn't been starched or seamed or anything like that, and so it's still really kind of pliable. So again, I always just say go ahead, you're going to have plenty of blocks, trust me. You go inside and then you're going to trim all the way around that area there. Now for those of you who don't have the frames, of course, and have something similar to the panel I have, what I want to do is I want to go right to the edge where the white is and do the same thing. And I'm going to get rid of all of that. Looks like I could use another blade in my cutter. And go all the way around and get rid of the white on all 6 of the Kaleidoscope panels that we're going to use for piecing. Remember, not 7. I mean, I guess you could do 7. Here's the problem. I put that one out of sight in my project box because I don't want to take the chance of getting that mixed in and then I'm in trouble. Okay, so I always set that one aside. That one is sacred to me. The precious panel, the 7th one. Okay, so I'm going to go all the way around and again, repeat this on all 6 of the panels that we're going to use to create our Kaleidoscope. Okay, so as I do this, we don't need to see doing the whole thing. So once I have all 6 of mine trimmed, And you have all 6 of yours trimmed. Okay, we have our 6 panels that we're going to be using and cutting apart, all pressed, all trimmed, all the shrapnel is removed from the edges. In our next video, what we're going to be doing is the next step. So we will see you then, and as always, take care of yourself. Take care of each other. We'll see you all down the road. Goodbye, everybody.